when a woman weighing over 300 pounds stormed into Judge Judy's courtroom and had the audacity to call America's toughest judge rude to her face. Nobody expected what happened next. But what Judge Judy said in response didn't just silence the courtroom. It exposed a shocking secret about this woman that left everyone's jaw on the floor. What the cameras captured that day became the most ruthless takedown in courtroom history. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why this moment changed everything. The courtroom was buzzing with anticipation as the cameras rolled for what seemed like another ordinary case. The fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow over the wooden benches packed with spectators, all waiting to witness Judge Judy Sheindlin in action. At 79 years old, she sat behind her elevated bench like a queen on her throne. Her short silver hair perfectly styled, her reading glasses perched on her nose, and her dark robe flowing around her small but commanding frame. For over 25 years, she had been the undisputed ruler of television courtroom justice, and her reputation preceded her, sharp, unforgiving, and absolutely allergic to nonsense. Across from her stood the plaintiff, a woman named Rebecca Morrison, though everyone in that courtroom would soon know her by a different name. Rebecca was a large woman, easily over 300 pounds, with bleached blonde hair pulled into a messy ponytail and a floral print dress that strained at the seams. But it wasn't her appearance that caught everyone's attention. It was the entitled scowl plastered across her face and the way she stood with her arms crossed as if she owned the place. Her lips were pursed in permanent disapproval, and her eyes darted around the room with barely concealed contempt. She had that look, the look of someone who had spent their entire life demanding to speak to managers, filing complaints and making everyone around her miserable. The bailiff standing near the door had already noticed it, exchanging a knowing glance with the court stenographer. They'd seen this type before. Rebecca had brought a case against her neighbor over a fence dispute, claiming $1,500 in damages for emotional distress and property devaluation. It was the kind of petty, trivial case that Judge Judy handled dozens of times a week. But something about Rebecca's demeanor suggested this wasn't going to be just another routine judgment. The defendant, a quiet man in his 60s named Mr. Chen, stood respectfully at his podium, his hands clasped in front of him, his expression calm and patient. He had brought a folder full of documents and photographs, organized with the precision of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The contrast between the two couldn't have been more striking, but what nobody in that courtroom knew, not the spectators, not the camera crew, not even the bailiff, was that this case was about to expose something far bigger than a fence dispute. Because Rebecca Morrison wasn't just another entitled plaintiff looking for easy money. She was about to reveal herself as something much worse, and Judge Judy was about to unleash a verbal destruction so precise, so calculated, and so absolutely ruthless that it would be replayed millions of times across the internet. The storm was coming, and everyone was about to witness it. Before we dive into what happened next, if you love watching entitled people get exactly what they deserve, you need to smash that like button right now and hit subscribe. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this unfolds, and we've got even more incredible courtroom justice coming your way. Turn on those notifications so you never miss a moment. Now let's get back to the courtroom and watch this entitled woman make the biggest mistake of her life. The case began with Judge Judy doing what she always did, cutting straight through the nonsense to get to the truth. She looked down at the papers in front of her, then lifted her eyes to Rebecca with that signature piercing stare that had intimidated thousands of litigants over the decades. "Ms. Morrison," she began, her voice crisp and businesslike, "you're here claiming $1,500 because your neighbor built a fence. Explain to me why you think you're entitled to that money." It was a simple question, direct and clear, the kind Judge Judy asked 100 times a day. But Rebecca's response was anything but simple. Rebecca shifted her weight from one foot to the other, her face already flushing red with barely contained irritation. "Well, Your Honor," she started, her voice dripping with condescension, "if you would just let me explain the whole situation from the beginning, you'd understand why I deserve this money." She launched into a rambling story about property lines and neighborhood associations and meetings she'd attended, her hands gesturing wildly as she spoke. She went on, circling around the actual issue without ever addressing Judge Judy's question. The judge's eyes narrowed slightly, a warning sign that anyone familiar with her show would recognize instantly. "Ms. Morrison," Judge Judy interrupted, her tone sharpening like a blade, "I didn't ask you for your life story. I asked you a specific question. Why do you believe your neighbor owes you $1,500? The courtroom grew quieter, the tension ratcheting up a notch. Rebecca's mouth snapped shut for a moment, her eyes widening in apparent shock that someone had dared to interrupt her. Then her face twisted into something ugly, a mixture of indignation and rage that made several spectators in the gallery lean forward in their seats. "I was getting to that," Rebecca shot back, her voice rising slightly. But you keep interrupting me. She rolled her eyes dramatically, turning slightly toward the gallery as if seeking support from the audience. It was a massive tactical error, one that Judge Judy caught immediately. The judge leaned forward, both hands flat on her bench, her voice dropping to that deadly calm tone that preceded every one of her legendary takedowns. Let me explain something to you, Ms. Morrison. This is my courtroom. When I ask you a question, you answer that question. You don't give me attitude, you don't roll your eyes, and you certainly don't look to the peanut gallery for validation. Do you understand me? Rebecca's face went from red to crimson. Her breathing quickened and her hands balled into fists at her sides. I understand that you're not giving me a fair chance to explain my side. She snapped back, her voice now loud enough that the bailiff took a small step forward. The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs. People exchanged shocked glances. Even the cameramen seemed to shift uncomfortably behind their equipment. Nobody talked to Judge Judy like that. Nobody. Judge Judy sat back in her chair, a cold smile playing at the corners of her mouth. It was the smile of a predator who had just watched their prey walk straight into a trap. Oh, I'm not being fair? She asked, her voice saccharine sweet in a way that made everyone's skin crawl. Please enlighten me. Tell me exactly how I'm being unfair to you. Rebecca opened her mouth to respond, but Judge Judy raised one finger, silencing her instantly. Actually, let me tell you what's unfair. What's unfair is that you've been standing in my courtroom for 3 minutes and you still haven't answered a single question I've asked you. What's unfair is that you're wasting everyone's time with your nonsense. What's unfair is that Mr. Chen over there, she gestured to the defendant, took time off work, prepared his evidence, and showed up ready to participate in a legal proceeding, while you showed up ready to perform a one-woman show. The courtroom was dead silent now. Mr. Chen remained perfectly still, his expression neutral, but there was the slightest hint of satisfaction in his eyes. Rebecca's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, no sound coming out, but the rage building behind her eyes was visible to everyone. This was the moment, the calm before the storm. And what was about to come next would be the most explosive confrontation Judge Judy's courtroom had ever seen. And then Rebecca Morrison said the words that would seal her fate and make her infamous across the internet. Her face twisted with rage, her entire body trembling with indignation, and she took a step forward from her podium, pointing her finger directly at Judge Judy Schindlin. You know what? She shouted, her voice echoing off the courtroom walls. You're being rude. You won't let me talk. You keep cutting me off. This is my case and you're treating me like I'm some kind of idiot. The courtroom didn't just go silent, it went into complete shock. People's mouths literally dropped open. The bailiff's hand instinctively moved toward Rebecca, ready to intervene if necessary. Even the cameraman zoomed in closer, sensing that they were capturing something extraordinary. Judge Judy didn't move. She didn't blink. She simply sat there completely still, staring at Rebecca with an expression that could have frozen hell itself. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 seconds. Then slowly, deliberately, Judge Judy leaned forward, folding her hands together on the bench in front of her. When she spoke, her voice was so quiet that everyone in the courtroom had to strain to hear it, which somehow made it even more terrifying. I'm rude? She asked, each word enunciated with surgical precision. Let me make sure I heard you correctly. You just called me rude? Rebecca, apparently too far gone to recognize the danger she was in, actually doubled down. Yes, you are. You won't let me finish a single sentence. You're dismissive and you're not listening to me at all. Her voice cracked with emotion, though whether it was genuine hurt or manufactured outrage was impossible to tell. She crossed her arms over her chest, her chin jutting out defiantly, as if she'd just scored some kind of victory. The spectators in the gallery were practically holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Judge Judy sat back in her chair, a smile spreading across her face that contained absolutely no warmth whatsoever. Well, she said, her tone suddenly conversational, almost friendly, which made it infinitely more dangerous. Let me tell you what rude actually means, Ms. Morrison, since you seem confused about the definition. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. Rude is coming into my courtroom unprepared. Rude is refusing to answer direct questions. Rude is wasting everyone's time with your verbal diarrhea. Rude is rolling your eyes at a judge. And rude, her voice suddenly cracked like a whip, making several people in the gallery actually jump, is pointing your finger at me in my courtroom and raising your voice like you're disciplining a child. Rebecca's face had gone from crimson to an almost purple shade. Her mouth opened to respond, but Judge Judy raised her hand. I'm not finished, she said coldly. Sit down, be quiet, and prepare yourself, because what's about to happen next is going to be the most educational experience of your entire life. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. What happened next was a masterclass in judicial destruction. Judge Judy's eyes never left Rebecca's face as she picked up the papers in front of her, flipping through them with deliberate slowness. "Let's talk about your case, Ms. Morrison," she began, her voice dripping with disdain. "You claim that Mr. Chen's fence has caused you $1,500 in damages. Emotional distress and property devaluation, you say." She looked up, one eyebrow raised. "Do you have any evidence to support these claims? Any documentation? Any proof whatsoever?" Rebecca's confidence visibly faltered. She stammered, "Well, I mean, it's obvious that—" Judge Judy cut her off instantly. "I didn't ask for your opinion on what's obvious. I asked for evidence. Do you have any?" The silence that followed was deafening. Rebecca's mouth worked soundlessly for a moment before she finally managed, "I have pictures of the fence." Judge Judy's expression didn't change. "Pictures of a fence, wonderful. And these pictures prove what exactly? That a fence exists? Congratulations, Ms. Morrison. You've documented the existence of wood and nails. What about a property survey? What about a contractor's assessment? What about medical documentation for your so-called emotional distress?" With each question, Rebecca seemed to shrink a little more. I didn't think I needed all that," she mumbled. Judge Judy leaned back, a look of utter contempt on her face. "You didn't think? That's becoming abundantly clear." Then Judge Judy did something that made everyone in the courtroom lean forward in anticipation. She turned her attention to Mr. Chen, who had been standing quietly at his podium throughout the entire exchange. "Mr. Chen," she said, her voice noticeably softer, almost kind, "tell me about this fence in 30 seconds or less." Mr. Chen nodded respectfully, opened his folder, and spoke in a calm, measured tone. "Your Honor, I built the fence entirely on my property. Here's the survey showing the property line." He held up an official-looking document. "The fence is 6 feet tall, which is within city regulations. Here's the permit." Another document. "Ms. Morrison complained that it blocked her view, but her kitchen window faces the opposite direction. Here are photographs proving that." He produced a series of clear, well-organized photos. "She's filed 3 previous lawsuits against other neighbors for similar frivolous claims. Here are the court records showing she lost all 3. The courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers. Rebecca's face went pale, then red again. Those cases were different," she shouted, but Judge Judy silenced her with a single look. "Ms. Morrison, sit down and be quiet, or I will have the bailiff remove you from this courtroom." Rebecca's mouth snapped shut, though her entire body was shaking with rage. Judge Judy took the documents from Mr. Chen, examining them with the speed and efficiency of someone who had done this 10,000 times before. When she looked up, her expression was one of absolute finality. "I've seen enough," she announced. "Ms. Morrison, not only are you losing this case, but you're about to learn a very expensive lesson about wasting the court's time." She turned to Mr. Chen. "Judgment for the defendant. Ms. Morrison, you will pay Mr. Chen's court costs and filing fees, totaling $475. The gavel hadn't even come down yet, but Rebecca was already exploding. "This is unfair!" she screamed, her face contorted with fury. "You didn't even listen to me. This is a joke." And that's when Judge Judy delivered the blow that would go down in courtroom history. Judge Judy set her gavel down slowly, deliberately, without breaking eye contact with Rebecca. The entire courtroom held its breath, sensing that something monumental was about to happen. When she spoke, her voice was ice-cold and razor-sharp. "Oh, I listened to you, Ms. Morrison. I listened very carefully. And do you know what I heard? I heard a woman who has made a career out of bullying her neighbors, filing frivolous lawsuits and playing the victim when she doesn't get her way. I heard a woman who thinks that being loud and obnoxious is a substitute for being right. And I heard a woman who's about to learn that her tactics don't work in my courtroom." Rebecca's face cycled through several shades of red and purple. "You can't talk to me like that. I have rights," she shrieked, her voice reaching a pitch that made people wince. Judge Judy actually laughed, a short, sharp bark of genuine amusement. "Rights? Let me educate you about rights, since you clearly slept through civics class. You have the right to bring a case to court. You exercise that right. You do not have the right to win just because you showed up. You do not have the right to be disrespectful, and you certainly do not have the right to waste everyone's time with nonsense and then throw a tantrum when it doesn't go your way." But Judge Judy wasn't finished, not even close. She stood up from her bench, something she rarely did, and the action made everyone in the courtroom sit up straighter. "Let's talk about what really happened here, shall we?" she continued, her voice rising with barely controlled fury. "You moved into a nice neighborhood and immediately decided that everyone around you needed to cater to your wishes. Mr. Chen built a fence, a perfectly legal fence on his own property, and you decided you didn't like it. So instead of being a decent neighbor and having a conversation, you did what you always do. You threatened. You harassed. You filed a lawsuit designed to intimidate him into tearing down a fence he has every right to have. The courtroom was absolutely riveted. Several spectators had pulled out their phones, recording every second despite the no-recording policy. Too captivated to care about the rules. Judge Judy continued. And when Mr. Chen didn't cave to your bullying, when he actually had the audacity to stand up for himself and come to court prepared with evidence, you decided to try your intimidation tactics on me. She paused, letting the words sink in. Big mistake. Huge mistake. Rebecca tried one more time to interrupt, her voice shrill and desperate. You don't understand what it's like to... Judge Judy's hand slammed down on the bench with a crack that echoed like a gunshot. Do not interrupt me when I am speaking. The power in her voice was absolute, and Rebecca actually took a step backward, her eyes widening in genuine fear for the first time. Here's what I understand, Ms. Morrison. I understand that you are a bully. I understand that you have terrorized 3 different neighbors with baseless lawsuits. I understand that you think being overweight gives you some kind of victim card that you can play whenever someone stands up to you. Well, let me tell you something. Your size doesn't make you oppressed. Your behavior makes you oppressive, the gallery gasped audibly. This was beyond anything anyone had expected. Judge Judy wasn't just ruling against Rebecca. She was systematically dismantling every excuse, every justification, every defensive tactic Rebecca had ever used. You want to know what's really rude, Ms. Morrison? Judge Judy continued, her voice dropping back to that deadly quiet tone. What's rude is assuming that everyone around you should accommodate your feelings while you show zero consideration for theirs. What's rude is using the legal system as a weapon to punish people who won't bow to your demands. What's rude is standing in my courtroom and calling me rude when you are the living, breathing definition of the word. Rebecca's face had gone from purple to an ashen gray. Her hands were trembling and tears were starting to form in her eyes. Whether from rage, humiliation, or genuine emotion was impossible to tell. But Judge Judy saw those tears and her expression didn't soften one bit. Don't even think about crying, she said coldly. Those tears don't work on me. Rebecca Morrison's entire body began to shake. The tears that had been forming in her eyes spilled over, running down her flushed cheeks, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pure, unbridled rage. You think you're so perfect, she screamed, her voice breaking. You sit up there in your robe acting like you're better than everyone. Well, you're just a bitter old woman who gets off on humiliating people. The courtroom erupted in shocked gasps. The bailiff immediately moved forward, his hand outstretched toward Rebecca. Even Mr. Chen, who had remained calm throughout the entire proceeding, looked genuinely startled by the outburst. Judge Judy's face remained completely impassive, but there was something dangerous glittering in her eyes. She picked up her gavel and pointed it at Rebecca like a weapon. Bailiff, if she says one more word, remove her from this courtroom and charge her with contempt. Her voice was deadly serious. But Rebecca had completely lost control. She grabbed her purse from the podium, knocking over the microphone in the process, creating a loud feedback screech that made everyone wince. I don't need to stay here and be abused by you, she shouted, backing toward the courtroom doors. This whole thing is rigged. Everyone knows your show is fake anyway. Judge Judy stood completely still, watching Rebecca's meltdown with an expression that almost resembled satisfaction. Ms. Morrison, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos, before you leave, there's something else the court needs to address. Rebecca paused at the door, her hand on the handle, breathing heavily. What? She spat. Judge Judy picked up another document from her desk, one she hadn't referenced before. This morning, before this hearing began, Mr. Chen's attorney submitted additional evidence. Security camera footage from his property. Would you like to know what it shows? The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Rebecca's face went completely white. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, but her voice had lost all its conviction. Judge Judy's smile was absolutely predatory now. The footage shows you, Ms. Morrison, deliberately damaging Mr. Chen's fence with a hammer on 3 separate occasions. It shows you spray painting obscenities on his garage door, and it shows you keying his car in broad daylight. The courtroom exploded in shocked exclamations. People were half standing from their seats, craning to see Rebecca's reaction. If this is blowing your mind right now, you need to hit that subscribe button and smash the like. Judge Judy is about to drop an even bigger bomb, and you won't believe what she does next. Drop a comment telling us what you think Rebecca deserves. Now let's see how this plays out, because it gets even more insane. Rebecca's mouth opened and closed repeatedly, no sound coming out. Her face had gone from white to a sickly green color. That's not. You can't prove, she sputtered weakly. Judge Judy leaned forward, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. Oh, but I can prove it. And now we're going to talk about criminal charges. Judge Judy wasn't done dismantling Rebecca Morrison's world. She held up the security footage documentation, her voice ringing with authority throughout the silent courtroom. Not only are you paying Mr. Chen $475 in court costs, Ms. Morrison, but I am also awarding him an additional $3,000 for property damage, emotional distress, and harassment. That's a total of $3,475. She paused, letting the number sink in. And I am personally forwarding this evidence to the District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. You're looking at vandalism charges, property destruction, and potentially stalking charges given your pattern of behavior. Rebecca's knees actually buckled. She grabbed the doorframe for support, her face now a ghastly shade of gray. "You can't do this to me," she whispered, but there was no fight left in her voice. It was the sound of someone whose entire reality had just collapsed. Judge Judy's expression didn't soften even slightly. "I just did. Bailiff, please escort Ms. Morrison out of my courtroom." "And Ms. Morrison?" Rebecca looked up, her eyes red and streaming with tears. "Don't ever come back to my courtroom again. You're banned. If you file another frivolous lawsuit against anyone, I will make it my personal mission to ensure every judge in this jurisdiction knows exactly who you are and what you've done." The bailiff gently but firmly took Rebecca's arm and guided her toward the exit. As she stumbled through the doors, her sobs could be heard echoing down the hallway. The courtroom remained in stunned silence for several seconds after she left. Then Judge Judy turned to Mr. Chen, her expression softening for the first time all day. "Mr. Chen, I apologize that you had to endure this woman's harassment. Your patience and preparation today were exemplary. You should receive your judgment within 30 days. Mr. Chen bowed his head respectfully. "Thank you, Your Honor. Justice was all I wanted." Judge Judy nodded, a rare smile crossing her face. "Justice is what you got." She looked out at the gallery, her expression turning serious once more. "Let this be a lesson to everyone watching. Respect is earned through character and integrity, not demanded through volume and intimidation. This courtroom rewards truth and preparation. It punishes lies and entitlement. If you come before me, come prepared, come honest, and come respectful. Otherwise, you'll leave here just like Ms. Morrison, humiliated and significantly poorer." The courtroom erupted in applause. Even the camera crew was clapping. Judge Judy allowed herself a small smile before banging her gavel. "Next case." And just like that, the legendary judge moved on to the next matter, leaving behind a moment that would be replayed millions of times across the internet. Within hours, the footage went viral. Rebecca Morrison became the poster child for entitled behavior and courtroom karma. Judge Judy's takedown was hailed as one of the most savage, most justified, and most satisfying moments in television history. Meanwhile, Rebecca's world continued to crumble. The district attorney did indeed press charges based on the security footage. She was convicted of vandalism and ordered to pay additional fines and complete community service. Her reputation in her neighborhood was destroyed. Within 6 months, she had moved to a different state, but the internet never forgets. The video of her meltdown followed her everywhere, a permanent reminder of the day she called Judge Judy rude and learned the hardest lesson of her life. And that's the incredible true story of how Judge Judy delivered the most ruthless courtroom destruction ever caught on camera. If this story left you satisfied and wanting more, smash that like button and subscribe to our channel right now. We bring you the most incredible moments of justice, karma, and people getting exactly what they deserve. Share this video with anyone who needs to see what happens when entitlement meets accountability. What was your favorite moment? Was it when Judge Judy stood up from her bench? When she revealed the security footage? Or when Rebecca had her complete meltdown? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one and we love hearing from you. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, respect and truth always win in the end. Keep standing up for what's right and never let bullies win. We'll see you in the next video with even more incredible stories of justice served.